and scroll back to the top of my agenda. Okay, welcome everyone to the Wednesday, October 21st, 2020 electronic meeting of the Ann Arbor Transportation Commission. This meeting is being held electronically to protect public health and safety due to the COVID-19 virus and to comply with orders issued by the Governor, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and the Washtenaw County Health Department. We intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. Public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 206-337-9723 or 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 953-3956-4801. This information is also available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN. This meeting was called to order at 7 o'clock, and now I will ask Kayla to call the roll.
Thank you, Molly. We have received regrets from Commissioner Dolan and Commissioner Lernahan, who are unable to join us this evening. I will now call the roll. Please say here when your name is called. Commissioner Boland?
Here.
Commissioner Felt?
Here.
Councilmember Griswold?
Here.
Commissioner Hadumaki?
Here.
Commissioner Hull?
Here.
Commissioner Kleinman?
Here.
Commissioner Parsons? Commissioner Smith? Commissioner Summers?
Yeah.
Sergeant Bill Clark?
Here.
Commissioner Crawford? Commissioner Hess?
Here.
Commissioner Margolis? Commissioner Stupka? We do have a quorum. I'll also do a quick introduction of a new face and a new name. Gage Belko is on the call, so thank you, Gage, for joining us. He has been helping with some of the commission material prep, and you saw the email from him this week, or last Friday, I suppose, and he will be on the call tonight to help with learning the ropes of the commission administration side. So just wanted to make that introduction, and I'll turn it back over to you, Molly.
Great, thank you. Let's see. So we now move on to the approval of the consent agenda. Are there any modifications to the consent agenda? I'm not seeing any. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Commissioner Felt, and can I have a second? Commissioner Hadamaki. Great. And then all those in favor of the motion, please physically raise your hands if you have camera on. If you don't have camera on, say, and you're opposed, say so. Otherwise, all those opposed to the motion. Okay, and it passes. We now have time for public comment. This is an opportunity for people to speak for up to 3 minutes. Please call 206-337-9723 or 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 953-3956-4801. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Do we have anyone on the line for public comment tonight?
We do. We
Great.
have caller 814 who has raised their hand. I am now enabling their microphone. You will press *6 to unmute yourself. 814, you can speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Clark Chernesky. Just want to say hi to everybody. There are 3 items I'd like to mention, all somewhat related. One is that Amtrak has now completed the improvements at the Ann Arbor station, especially to make it more accessible to people with disabilities. It includes a new ticket counter, which is a little bit lower than the older one, so it's more friendly, especially if you're in a wheelchair. The restrooms have been thoroughly redone with new wall and floor tiles, and brand new seating for the first time in over 30 years. And if you can, stop by and take a look. They also now have push button doors, so you don't have to touch the door to enter the station. The Allen Creek Berm tunnel is virtually completed. I think some fencing remains. And speaking of fencing, there's a $30 million project announced a few days ago by Michigan Department of Transportation, and this will fund grade crossing and fencing improvements along the Michigan line between Dearborn and Kalamazoo. And it includes something like 150 miles of fencing. Now, one of the places especially mentioned was Ypsilanti and Ann Arbor area. So this means that there'll be additional fencing put up, and it's more reason why the city should move on ways of crossing the tracks legally, especially North Main Street in conjunction with the border-to-border trail near M14, and also along the Arboretum. There are actually about 2 locations that should have a way of crossing the tracks, whether it be tunnel, bridge, or maybe some kind of a at-grade crossing with warning devices. So go out and take a look. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those updates. Do we have any other public comments tonight?
We do not.
Okay,
Those are
great.
all the comments.
And as we have been doing during the virtual meetings, if we do get a call later in the meeting, because I know it can take some time, we can pause to reopen public comments so that we have a chance to hear from everyone. So now we invite Cynthia Redinger, the transportation engineer, to present on pedestrians and roundabouts.
And as we switch over to Cynthia, I just want to announce a quick update in the attendance of the meeting. We have Commissioner Parsons, Commissioner Smith, and Commissioner Crawford, who are also present this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cynthia Redinger, and I'm one of the city's transportation engineers. This evening, I'm going to be briefly presenting on roundabouts and some considerations, particularly for non-motorized transportation. I would like to point out that the presentation is a little bit different than that which you previously received. I found out that I had less time to present than I thought I did. So I have done some consolidation on that and provided some links so that you can get more information if you're interested. Also, I would like to note that it has been updated in Legistar and it is marked as final. So let's begin. I'm going to turn off my video. Okay, so as I said, we are talking about roundabouts, and just going to just for your information, we are talking about modern roundabouts. So anyone who's used to a traffic circle, we're not talking about traffic circles, we're talking about roundabouts. And as I said, there is more information available, and the FHWA Office of Safety site is very good. The link is here, and there are safety aspects of roundabouts presentation. This presentation is roughly based on that with some modifications to show Ann Arbor roundabouts, and it is an excellent presentation with lots of presenter notes, so you can get a lot of information from that yourselves. There are 2 basic roundabout types that transportation engineers consider. Those are the multi-lane and the single-lane roundabouts. I would like to very briefly point out that throughout the presentation, there are images of our roundabouts in and about the city of Ann Arbor. Some of those are outside of our jurisdiction. The majority of the roundabouts that we have in the city are single lane roundabouts. We have 60% that are single lane and 40% that include more than one lane at some point in the circulating roadway. And I have listed here a series, where the roundabouts are, the ones that are under the jurisdiction of the city of Ann Arbor, MDOT, and the Washtenaw County Road Commission. I'm going to kind of skim through that. The next things that we'll be talking about are really kind of the key features of roundabouts and sort of how those go into safety. I'm going to proceed to save time. Our first key area is yield control. So for a modern roundabout, vehicles yield upon entry to the roundabout. And there are really two areas of two zones of conflict for motorists who are entering into a roundabout. The first area is where you need to be looking for non-motorized activity within the crosswalk. And that is the first area that you will come to. And as that has no other form of control, Ann Arbor's crosswalk law applies at this location. So motorists are required to stop for pedestrians within or approaching the crosswalk. The second area of conflict is that yield line, and that is the area where a motorist yields upon entry to anyone who's already in the circulating roadway. And at this point in time, a motorist would be looking to their left to look for vehicles already in that circulating roadway. And I do want to point out here that circulating roadway, well, I can proceed to the next slide. So the circulating roadway, there's no traffic control in the circulating roadway. It does operate travels in a counterclockwise direction. So you're looking for traffic from the left and you are proceeding. If you're exiting the circulating roadway and there is a pedestrian at or within the crosswalk, then you are required to yield to that pedestrian. So you're required to stop for them. And even if that means that you might be slightly impinging on the circulating roadway, you are still required to be stopping for that. So the biggest feature of these intersections is their central island, and that is the central island deflects vehicles from a straight line path, and that encourages slower speeds and is really the big feature that makes this circular intersection so special. Supporting the central island, we do have our splitter island, and the splitter islands they're there to separate, deflect, and slow traffic. Splitter islands also provide refuge for pedestrian crossings at the approach. And the design of these islands are really important to get vehicles in proper alignment to travel through the circulating roadway and to really get that initial slowdown, and they're really part of reducing the speed of that kind of fastest path of travel across the intersection. Landscaping is another key feature. So landscaping provides visual screen for drivers. It also makes them aware of the intersection and directs their attention to look left. So this particular example is Nixon and Huron Parkway. And there's an agreement with an adjacent property owner who does take care of the landscaping in this intersection. And they choose to do a little bit extra with some of the annuals and things like that. But this is a really important key feature of roundabouts, because you are not supposed to be looking across a roundabout. You're really supposed to be looking to the left and also scanning for pedestrian activity at the crosswalk as you are entering the roundabout. And talking about pedestrian access is a very important feature as far as how we design our roundabouts. Pedestrian access shall meet ADA requirements, and crosswalks are designed in accordance with city guidelines. Some of the questions that came in from the Transportation Commission involved how do we really do this well, especially for people who are visually challenged. So it is true that roundabouts can be a little bit challenging for people who are visually challenged. The circulating roadway can make it difficult for someone who is relying on the sound of an approaching vehicle to really pinpoint where they're coming from. So one of the features that roundabouts frequently do include is to move that pedestrian crossing back from the circulating roadway just a little bit. So in this example, which is Nixon, Huron, and Green, that crosswalk has been pulled back from the circulating roadway so that a vehicle really has to be completely headed in the direction of the crosswalk and have that more directional travel. That helps with identifying where vehicles are physically placed. Another thing that is a really important feature here is something that the city developed, especially when they were working on the Nixon and Huron Parkway roadway in coordination with the Disability Commission. And you can see them, mark it with the mouse right here. These are rumble strips, and they are an audible detection. They allow people to know that they're coming. They also have the feature of making a motorist aware that there's something going on the roadway that they need to be taking special care and attention to. The Disabilities Commission has given us feedback that they really like this feature, but there were some designs that they requested based on the older designs, and so those have been moved back from the crosswalk a little bit as implemented here in the Nixon Huron Green roundabout. This is something that is above and beyond what the Access Board recommends. Also, I wanted to note that at multi-lane roundabouts, the majority of the city's roundabouts are single-lane roundabouts, as we discussed previously, but at multi-lane roundabouts where there is a good amount of pedestrian activity, it is a recommended practice to install our RFBs or PHBs at those locations, and that's something that is a design consideration that should be considered. It is not a recommendation for single lane roundabouts. Along with pedestrian access, we are always looking at what our bicycle access is. And bicycle access is provided for a variety of rider types. Low stress access is provided through shared use routes that are outside of the roundabout. And bicyclists may also use the circulating roadway. So if you were a cyclist on Green Road, you could come up, and I hope you can see my pointer. You can come up and you can either choose to exit the roadway and enter into the shared use area and then come over and cross in the crosswalk, or you can choose to enter into the lane and ride through the roundabout. Something that I would like to point out here is that MDOT has recently approved the use of bike may use full lane signs in the state of Michigan. And that's something that the League of Michigan Bicyclists was really involved with. And this sign has been in the federal manual for a while, but it was not approved for use in the state. Now that it's approved for use in the state, staff discussed the sign, and we think that we do need to be a little judicious in where we choose to use them. But one of our primary areas that we're interested in going ahead and installing these signs as we move forward is at our roundabouts, so that to just make motorists more aware of the fact that they should be expecting bicyclists within the roadway and the circulating roadway in the middle of the lane. The truck apron is another feature that's really important. Very briefly, truck aprons allow for tighter vehicle operating areas while accommodating truck movements. So your driving space can be smaller for your smaller vehicles, such as passenger cars and trucks, and even like single unit box trucks. But if you have a really large vehicle coming through, like a semi, then it has the area to be able to safely operate while not leaving the roundabout too wide and open during other times. Very briefly, a little bit of information about signing and pavement markings. Signing and pavement markings at roundabouts has changed a lot over time. When roundabouts were first being installed, the 3 roundabouts that are on Maple at the two ramp termini and the Skyline High School driveway are examples of older designs. They're some of the oldest designs in the county. And, you know, the way that those roundabouts are signed and marked is a bit different than some of the more recent installations. When these types of intersections were first being installed, we signed them to death, basically. There were tons of signs and all of those things. And it actually, as our collective across the country experience with these types of intersections has matured, part of what engineers and the Federal Highway Administration have come to recognize is that too much information can be a problem, and all of that signing is really kind of a lot of visual stimuli, and it does distract from the really important things that people need to be looking for, which are the non-motorized users and conflicts with vehicles. So that's why you may have noticed a simplification of signing over time. Streetlights are another really important aspect of roundabouts, and particularly of, oh goodness, I'm running late, Kayla, I'm sorry. Okay, and at roundabouts particularly, we are looking at providing positive contrast lighting for the non-motorized conflict points, and ambient lighting for areas where vehicles could be, so that everyone can see them a little bit better. Why choose a roundabout? Very quickly, to improve safety, slow drivers, reduce congestion and pollution, save money, and complement community values. The next slide just discusses how it is a proven safety countermeasure, and that they are very effective at reducing crashes, particularly severe injury crashes and angle and left turn related crashes. This gets accomplished partially through reduction of vehicle to vehicle conflicts. Of the slide, you can see a standard intersection and a roundabout, and it shows the conflict points, which vehicle to vehicle conflict points are places where 2 vehicles could collide. Roundabout reduces the number of conflict points from 32 to 8, which is a significant reduction. Also, for vehicle pedestrian conflicts, there's a reduction. It's not quite as significant, but the conflict points are reduced in half. Some special safety considerations, some of these we've probably already touched on. Pedestrians are generally safer in roundabout intersections, although it can be a more active crossing. So everyone needs to be actively looking for each other, is really what that implies. Pedestrians have the advantage of crossing only one direction of traffic at a time, and roundabouts designs really focus on reducing driver speed. So when we slow speeds down, all of those interactions have the capacity to be much safer. So when vehicles are slowed down, drivers have more time to perceive and react to conditions. And if someone does make an error, reduction in speed reduces the severity of the outcome. So some of the ADA enhancements, the truncated domes, accessible ramps, angled turns and sidewalks. So we try to avoid curvilinear sidewalks so that individuals don't get disoriented about which direction they're traveling, and the audible warning strips, as we discussed before. I've also provided FHWA's list of where to consider roundabouts, and it's a very long list with lots of places. Since I am running late, I'm just going to go ahead and move along. And I did provide a couple of before and after project slides. So we have Nixon, Duvarn, and Green. This is what it was before and after. It did, you know, a lot of change in land use out there, which really kind of facilitated that change. Nixon, Huron, Parkway, this is a really great example of improving pedestrian conditions because we had this multi-way, all-way stop where we had 3-lane approaches, really wide crossing distances. I mean, it's really kind of like 8 lanes worth of distance that you were crossing there without any protection compared to how it is afterwards. And Geddes and Earhart before, Geddes and Earhart after, lots of pedestrian facilities that have been installed out there that weren't there previously. So I apologize for rushing through that, but not quite fast enough, I'm sure. And so I'm going to stop sharing so that I can take any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. This was really helpful and informative. So I'm going to ask people to physically raise your hand, and I will call on you as I see you. If you're not using your camera, you could also use, oh, we don't have the raise hand function. Yeah, you have to raise your hand. Commissioner Hadamaki.
Thank you. Do roundabouts by definition always have splitter islands? Is there ever a possibility that there wouldn't be a splitter island so that pedestrians would have to cross 2 lanes or, you know, opposite lane at traffic at the same time? I want to make sure that there would never be a case where a pedestrian would have to cross, you know, 2 lanes going in opposite directions at once.
So there will always be a splitter island. If it is a very small roundabout, that splitter island might be more flush or painted. So for instance, we have an intersection on Pittsfield Boulevard that was a very large Y intersection that was converted from that Y that was just a sea of pavement into a roundabout. And as that was it's a neighborhood street. And part of that conversion was they built a physical central island, but the splitter islands are painted on that. So that's an example where you might not have a physical splitter island, but anything that is above and beyond more of a neighborhood kind of traffic calming sort of design, you're going to have physical islands.
I think in the interest of time, we're going to limit additional questions. If you have other questions, feel free to email them to Kayla, and we can get the answers out to everyone in the timely manner after that. But I think we're going to move on. Thank you very much. This was a really helpful presentation. So let's see, next we're going to invite Jane Allen, Civil Engineer and Project Manager, to provide an update on the Scioto Church Road improvements.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jane Allen. I'm a project engineer I'm project manager in the engineering department with the city. I'm managing the Scioto Church Road Improvement Project for next year. I will share my screen now and take myself off video. Can everyone see this first slide?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. The project overview is a little bit of water main work, and we have road resurfacing and some stormwater improvements. But primarily, we're going to try to do some active transportation considerations, including new sidewalks, crosswalks, and bike lanes. We had a public meeting in January. We described, I'll go back. We described all the options that we thought we could consider. We had ideas of where we would want to put the bike lanes, the crosswalks, and the sidewalks, or the sidewalk gaps in our system in the entire project limits would be filled with this project. We were hoping that everyone would be in favor of that. We had the meeting, we had a poll to consider the bike lanes and the sidewalks, but also we had a large map that everyone could put little notes and pinpoints on where they wanted to cross. And there were some locations that the non-transportation, the non-motorized transportation plan had encouraged, and we were getting feedback from that. We described all the options. We described, construction conflicts and impacts to everyone, but primarily what I'm going to share with you tonight is the feedback we got on the active transportation improvements. First, we polled everyone about where they lived in the property. This is what we got regarding the locations and the residents' involvement. What the primary interest was in the project, and we can see on number E, the active transportation features, that was very large, over 52%. There's parking along Style Church between Greenview and South Maple that we would want to eliminate to install bike lanes, and we wanted to see if people were interested in doing that. So at the public meeting, we did get a 56% yes answer to that. Later, you'll see some more polling that we did on this question. As far as the sidewalks, there were two zones. One belongs to the Ann Arbor Public Schools, and the other are 3 lots that are privately owned. So this is the first one. There's 3 lots there that are a gap to the system in red. We asked if they were in favor or opposed. Many people were in favor of filling that gap. This one with the Ann Arbor Public School System is between Greenview and South 7th. And a lot of people were in favor of that also. As far as the bike lanes, as I mentioned before, not only did we do the public meeting polling, we also did an A2 Open City Hall and a postcard survey to adjacent property owners that had on-street parking in front of their residences. You can see the results there. And in the resolution also, we show the comments that people made, if they were opposed or for. A lot of people that were for eliminating the on-street parking didn't have any comments, so you'll see a lot of comments to the contrary, but that will be in the resolution. So when we took all this information and feedback that we got from the residents and from the public meeting, this is the design that we are proposing for construction for next year. You can see in yellow there, that's the existing bike lanes. The proposed bike lanes there are in blue. We will be matching the cross-section east of Greenview that was implemented also with last year's Style Church project. It will be a complete biking experience where you'll be able to bike the entire length of this project on either side of the road. However, on the north side of Style Church, for the entire blue area, that would be a loss of on-street parking, and that would require city council approval. The proposed sidewalks that we're planning to fill are in red there, and that will complete all the gaps in this project location. The proposed crosswalk locations, now we have east of Covington, a little bit near that Ruby Court, and east of Churchill and east of Mershon. Based on the evaluation from the transportation engineers, this is the standard plus crosswalk design. So if Cynthia would like to speak after my presentation about what is actually going to be installed, these are just the opportunities of what could be installed based on Standard Plus, and I have the website there for our crosswalk design guidelines. These are just some details that the design team drew up regarding the plans that are being presented to MDOT. So you can see the crosswalk there east of Covington. We were able to put it east of the guardrail, so we don't have to make a break in the guardrail where the grade is steep. And also, you'll notice that's the end of Ruby Court there. We do have an easement for a public walkway, but the grade is too steep there to make a safe crossing to that cul-de-sac. However, you'll see in a later slide that in the next cul-de-sac, Yeoman Court, we were able to introduce a connection between the court sidewalk and South Church sidewalk. So you see there at Yeoman Court. I have spoken to the residents there. I don't know if you can see my cursor. There is a resident here that's opposed. This resident isn't, she's reluctant, but she's acceptable of it. It's on her property. She'll be the one to have to maintain that sidewalk. And you can see also, we have a buffer bike lane. And this is the crosswalk east of Churchill. This is the one east of Mershon. And this just is a view of what the Greenview and South Church intersection would look like, and what what we're going to implement in the project as far as where we'll be paving, where our improvements will be, what new restoration we'll have. You can see the sidewalk there too, going into the Ann Arbor Public School System property. We are going to be, you'll see it's winding into their property. We're going to have discussions with them regarding getting an easement because there are large trees that we want to save there. They were open to that on the other section of South Church. So we hope that they will be open to that as well here. And I know my time was very short. I can go back to any slides anyone has questions about.
Thank you. If you wouldn't mind unsharing your screen just so I can see folks who have questions.
Sure.
Thank you. So anyone have any questions? Thank you so much. This was really helpful and really very brief. Councilmember Griswold.
Is there funding to put positive contrast lighting at these crosswalks at the time that they're constructed?
Yes, we will be putting streetlights in before the crosswalks are actually available to pedestrians. That will be something part of the project that's funded by this project.
Okay, great, thanks.
Commissioner Hadamaki.
For the sidewalk gap funding, is there's a vote on the proposal for that millage. Do you anticipate having to change any plans or anything based on the outcome of that?
Well, I was holding off on reaching out to some of those property owners until after the November vote to see, where the funding would be, because I didn't want to start in a special assessment district at this time. However, we are putting it in the plans. We're hoping to do it. I did speak to the residents because, we were trying to get the plans together. One of the residents wants to save some of their trees, so they wanted the sidewalk to be further from the road. They are open to giving us an easement for that. So I spoke to 2 out of the 3 property owners, and they are in favor. And even if they were assessed, if the vote didn't go through in November, if they had to be assessed, this is an MDOT project. So 80% of the construction cost is covered through MDOT. So they would have a little bit of leniency, or help with the funding that other projects haven't had in the past. The one property owner I wasn't able to reach is actually a Township Island, and they are coming into the city now, so they're going to be developing that land. So they would have to install the sidewalks regardless, and it would be 100% on their cost. So if they were even if the vote doesn't go in the favor of funding sidewalk gaps, and they were especially assessed, it would be a savings to them.
I actually have a question. In the breakdown you had of the different public engagement sessions, you showed the percentages for the different modes of engagement, the survey and the postcards. I'm wondering if you have raw numbers for that. So like, the percentage might have been higher in one thing, but the total people was lower or something like that. Is that information that you have?
Oh, it is, and let me go back. Well, I'll go back to the slide myself and see.
If you need to bring it back up, that's helpful too.
I know it's in the memo or resolution that I gave to everyone. Let me share my screen real quick. I know from the postcard survey that's adjacent property owners, there were 17 people that responded. I think the open city hall, if I'm not mistaken.
I've got it, Jane. It's
Okay.
it is in the memo of the resolution that's in Legistar and available to all commissioners. There were 48 community members who took the survey at the public meeting in January. 146 surveys were taken online through A2 Open City Hall and 17 postcards from adjacent property owners. So we have the total numbers of how many people, and then those are the percentages. We don't have, though we could figure it out, we could do the math, but we don't have a chart readily available that tells you the number of people who were in support or opposed.
Right, no, that's helpful. And I see that also in the memo. Thank you. Other questions? Okay, great. So it sounds like looks like we don't have any other questions. Thank you again for this presentation. It was really helpful.
Thank you so much.
So we're now going to open up the meeting to discuss the draft resolution to eliminate on-street parking on this section of Scioto Church. So I think, yeah, so let's talk about it.
And this is for context, this is an action item for the commission. The resolution that is provided is a draft resolution that City Council will consider. And this is the Transportation Commission's opportunity to take an action, whether recommending that council approve that resolution or recommending that council does not approve that resolution, recommending defeat of that resolution, I suppose.
And the name of this document, just for those who need to see it, it's the Scioto Church on-street parking elimination resolution. I mean, I can go first. I think this seems like a clear instance where the putting in the bike lane has a lot of support. It means a continuous network. There are lots of side streets there with street parking. This seems like a pretty clear decision to me. But obviously we can discuss further if we need to. Councilmember Griswold.
Do you have any data on how many people actually park on the street? I don't think I've ever seen a car parked there. And so it looks like the majority of the homeowners do not prefer a bike lane. On the other hand, I'm wondering how much use the parking spots actually get.
Prior to the public meeting, we did a survey internally with staff who lived in the area or right-of-way inspectors who could drive the area occasionally. We found 1 to 2 cars parked there on a daily basis, primarily in front of one particular house. And we heard strong opposition from them regarding how they use their house, how many people have cars at their residence, and how many people come to their house on a normal basis, and that they say parking on a side street would be inconvenient. A lot of the other people who didn't seem to use the parking, even if they said no, it was based on just the idea that if they had company coming, they would want to have a place for them to park. And I think there was one person spoke to me about the need for the parking on game days, because a lot of people park in that neighborhood for U of M football games.
Other questions or thoughts? Commissioner Parsons.
Jane, I really appreciate that you guys went into that depth to talk to neighbors about their parking preferences.
Sorry, you're a bit hard to hear you.
Sorry, maybe I'll get closer. Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. Jane, I really appreciate you going out and talking to residents. That number that 60% didn't want it, but actually talking to them about why, it's low impact, it's game days, it's one resident. I mean, the overall impact is so positive, so that I think we have to say yes and recommend this to council with full support. I really appreciate how much you're doing to bring the community in so that we can understand exactly what's going on. So thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to point out too, with eliminating a bike lane, eliminating the on-street parking, not only do we get a bike lane, but we get a buffered bike lane.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I'm not seeing a lot of discussion on this, so I think we can just move to a vote. So, oh no, I have lost my agenda. Great. So, is there a motion to recommend that council approve the resolution as presented? I see Commissioner Parsons and a second from Boland. Great. So, all those in favor of the motion, I'm going to ask everyone to raise hands. All those opposed? And any abstentions? All right, so the motion passes. So we are going to recommend that City Council approve this resolution to remove on-street parking and add a buffered bike lane on Scioto Church.
And it passes unanimously.
Yes, unanimously.
Just want to confirm in case I missed any hands. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much. That we are ready. Oh wow, that was it for business. We're moving right along tonight. So we're moving on to the staff report and updates from Raymond Hess. So we received.
Molly, I apologize. There must have been an error in the agenda outline that
oh no,
meeting outline. We do. Okay, we do have one more. Thank you.
One more thing. So sorry. Where did it go? Okay. Now we're inviting Transportation Manager Eli Cooper and Transportation Plan Consultant Stacy Meekins to present the Comprehensive Transportation Plan update. Oh, right. And this is going to be 45 minutes. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. Thank you.
Yes. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. I am Eli Cooper, the city's Transportation Program Manager in our Transportation Group. And I will be covering the status and process of the plan update, and then Stacy Meekins, who's the project manager with Sam Schwartz, will cover the plan in great detail. This draft comprehensive transportation plan is or will be the first of its kind in the city. Historically, we've had separate comprehensive non-motorized plans and vehicle-oriented transportation plans. The document that you'll have introduced to you this evening includes planning for both the vehicle and the active transportation realm. This, as to process, is the introduction of the initial draft plan itself. So what we're doing is sharing with you an overview of the plan, and we're looking for your questions and input on it as we would revise this document to bring it through a formal approval process later this year and into next year. In addition to the presentation to the Commission here this evening, we are hosting a series of advisory committee meetings. So we had our technical advisory committee meet tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We're having a citizen advisory committee. That meeting will be held virtually via Zoom, and it's also an opportunity for the public to see an overview of the plan. There is a general public meeting, again, a virtual Zoom meeting that's scheduled for 2 p.m. on October 29th. We as a team went over back and forth. Do we do it in the evening? Do we do it in the afternoon? What we decided was it's perhaps better to do it in the afternoon. More people are engaged and online, not dealing with home chores in the evening. But in order to make sure that everyone has access to the presentation, the meeting will be taped in the afternoon. And once we can have it processed, it will be put available on the website. We are, like I said, presenting this initial draft, looking for questions and feedback. We would request that if the commission has any input or feedback to staff, that be provided by November the 6th. We will allow 2 full weeks after the public meeting on the 29th through Friday, November 13th for public input. But in order to begin to move this plan forward into the formal review and approval process, we are trying to keep a fairly short opportunity for input at this time. If we get a lot of input, clearly we have the opportunity to delay the approval process moving forward. Once we have introduced the plan, and it's been on the project website over the past weekend until this week, we're going to then enter into the formal review process. We will come back before the Transportation Commission, so you'll have a look at any adjustments that might be made to this document. Then, as a portion of the city's master plan, we have to follow the statutory process for county and adjoining community review. What that means is after we have the Transportation Commission blessing, we will then move to the Planning Commission, who will review the document and determine that it's appropriate for forwarding to the City Council to provide to the county and adjacent communities for review. They have up to 63 days to review the document and provide feedback back to the City of Ann Arbor. Once we have completed the county and adjoining community review process, I said I was speaking as to process. I apologize. I know it's a lot of information, but I would just want to say it now. This way we'll just have to live through all of these steps. The City Planning Commission is required by law to convene a public hearing on the revised draft. So if we get any comments during that county review, we'll update that draft. Public hearing will be held. The City Planning Commission will then review that document after the public hearing. The expectation is that a document will satisfy their interest. It will be approved by the City Planning Commission and then recommended to the City Council for adoption. Clearly, we're looking at coming back to this commission before we begin the intergovernmental process, and that we would be available and will coordinate with Kala, Raymond, and others to make sure that this Transportation Commission has every opportunity to review the document as it moves forward. Sorry it took me that long, but now I will turn it over to Stacy, who will take you through the substance, and I apologize. I didn't write the statute, but at least I could explain it. Stacy, it's all yours.
We can't hear you. You don't appear to be muted, but we're not hearing you.
How's that?
Good.
Thank you.
Great. Sorry about that. All right. Well, thank you all for having me back. It's good to see you virtually. I do miss those train trips to Ann Arbor, I have to admit. But this is definitely an efficient way to go about it as well. And thank you for the introduction, Eli. So hopefully you all have had a chance to at least see the document. I don't expect that you've all necessarily gone through it with a fine-tooth comb yet, but I hope that you do have a chance to read through the sections that are at least important to you. All right, this doesn't want to advance now. We practiced this before the meeting and everything worked just fine then.
That's how it always goes.
I know. Let me try again.
Stacey, it looks like you're on the last.
I was, you're right. Thank you. That's why it's not going forward. All right. Let's start over. And sorry, now it looks like I have the wrong presentation up.
While Stacy switches presentations, I guess I don't want to get us too off track, but if there is any quick question for Eli on the process that he covered, or are we all set, Stacy?
We are, sorry,
Okay, all right.
third time's a charm.
Was just going to try to use the time efficiently, but we'll save those questions. We'll have plenty of time for that, and I'll let you go ahead, Stacy. Thanks.
Thanks, sorry about that, guys. So just an overview of what I want to go through tonight. I'm going to review the plan process that we went through, give you an overview of the plan document, and an overview of select strategies. There are about 75 strategies overall in the document, and we won't have a chance to go through all of them here in this meeting. So I've kind of cherry-picked them based on what we feel is important to get you to the goals of the overall plan, and also based on what we've heard is really important to the community, either through this group or public engagement. So this was a long process that's consolidated down into this one slide here. And I just wanted to spend a little bit of time going through our overall process. We've boiled it down into 3 phases. The first one being the discovery phase, in which the goals were really for us to learn about what's going on in Ann Arbor today and where do we want to get to? What are the overall values and goals for the plan? So that's where we're really digging into the data analysis. That's where we talked to staff and the committees and came to Transportation Commission early on in the process to hear what are the values for Ann Arbor from a mobility perspective. And so that, can you guys see my mouse too? Okay. So this column is basically our work where we kind of retreat back to our office and do our own digging. And then this column is really the stakeholder and staff engagement. And then the green boxes are how we engage the public at each phase. So in the beginning, we did a bunch of focus groups. We did a kind of overview transportation behaviors survey that was online. We also did a bicyclist level of comfort survey online. We held 1 public open house and 2 pop-up meetings. And again, kind of towards the goals of understanding what's going on today and what are the values and goals that we should be working towards. And then the next major phase was what we call the ideation phase. And that's where we're developing ideas for the projects, the programs, the policies that will help us get to those goals. So on our end, we're looking at best practices, we're developing concepts and compiling kind of that long list of strategies that was then further refined. And we had a staff workshop in that phase. We again had some committee meetings and Transportation Commission meetings as well. We brought some of those items to a public open house last November and coupled that with an online survey about the corridors that we're focusing on. We were able to kind of understand what from this early outreach, what was really important to the community, and then build on that with a pedestrian crossing online survey and a bike network survey online. And then finally, we had the action planning phase, which we're getting towards the end of now, in which we're really trying to organize those strategies, prioritize them, put them in a plan in a way that is digestible and actionable for the city. So I'll kind of remind you of some of the specific tasks we did there through that process. And what we're working on now is is refining the document, refining the strategies, putting cost estimates to them, and helping the city, identify those action steps. So we put the committees to work. We really used the committees very strongly throughout this process to help us both identify the strategies and then refine them and figure out what are the highest priorities for the city. And we have the virtual public open house coming up next week, as Eli mentioned. So just some highlights from each of those phases, the things that we zeroed in on. Nope, I didn't mean to. Maybe it's because I'm looking at the word zero twice, no pun intended. But the two goals that we aligned around were that we are moving towards 0 deaths and 0 emissions. And these were really kind of external to our process, I would say. The city had identified a goal of Vision Zero before we came into the picture. And with A20, we kind of took that as our marching orders as well, to align with that and make sure that our plan and the strategies in here align with A20 and help the city get to both of those major goals. So in the action planning phase, I don't remember if I showed you this last time, but with the CAC, we took this activity in which we had that really long list of strategies and asked them to tell us how easy it might be to implement that strategy and what kind of impact did they expect to see in Ann Arbor based on that strategy. And then I'm sure you will remember the Excel-based spreadsheet, worksheet that we gave you along with the TAC for your own input on what might have the biggest impact, what should be the highest priority, and what should be the timeline of these strategies. And that really drove the organization of the plan. So what we ended up with are 22, what we're calling key strategies. And those were the ones that the commission and the TAC and the staff all felt collectively were going to have the biggest impact. And so we gave those a little bit more emphasis in the plan, a lot more background about what the current condition is and where we want to go and how we get there. Each of the strategies also has associated with it a designation of which value it speaks to. So if you'll remember, we ended up with the values of safety, mobility, accessibility for all, healthy people and sustainable places, and regional connectivity. And then it also, each strategy also has associated with it the E's. And I think I'm actually missing one. So whether it is an engineering-based strategy, an education, encouragement, enforcement, it speaks to equity, and evaluation is the final one. I should mention too that the strategies, a lot of the strategies cross-cut a lot of these values. So we didn't organize the plan based on value, but we did want to speak to how it is relating back to those values. And then each strategy also has a time associated with it, meaning that is the time that we think the city should start on that strategy. It does not mean that everything needs to be finished within that timeline. So just wanted to give you guys kind of an orientation to the document itself. And so this is what the key strategies looks like. Every one is a little bit different, obviously, based on how much depth we had to go into for each one, but these components are the same. So we start with the strategy name. This is kind of a shorthand name, and then the full strategy written out. the current state of that particular topic. And then the strategy description is what is actually being proposed. Across the top, we have how it relates to the values. And then we also have associated with each value the timeline, lead agency or partners, and the targets that we are setting for that specific strategy. So I talked a fair amount about the key strategies. We do have a full list of all strategies that we think are important to get to zero. And so we have a complete matrix of all the strategies following those key strategies. So all the key strategies are actually repeated in here, so that we wanted to make sure that they're all available in one place, but it is noted which one is a key strategy so that it's not confusing that you're seeing it again, hopefully. So I'm just going to go, despite not organizing the document this way, I did for the ease of communicating some of the strategies, organize the presentation by value. And I'm just going to go through some of the key strategies that we think are critical to achieving that value. So the first one I've mentioned before in these meetings, that with Vision Zero, there's a strong focus on targeting the specific locations and the specific behaviors that are causing the serious injury crashes. So we had identified pretty early on in the process these corridors and intersections where there's a disproportionate amount of those serious injury crashes. And so there's a number of high-level ways that we think you could start addressing those, be it new capital improvement projects or coordinating with other planned projects or ongoing work, and then using the quick build safety program, which is another strategy. So a lot of these strategies also kind of align with each other and overlap and talk to each other. So I know that the quick build program was of interest to this group. That's definitely a strategy that we think is very important to improving safety in Ann Arbor. And so we've incorporated the idea of developing a program as a strategy, and then coupled that with a toolbox of different treatment types to give you some ideas of how to move forward with that strategy. And so I did mention that each strategy has a set of targets. We also have a set of metrics for each value, so that at a high level, you can measure how you're doing towards that overall goal. So these are the value level metrics that we have for safety. And again, some of these we adopted, they were kind of directives to us in this planning process, that we would have 0 people killed or seriously injured in traffic crashes in Ann Arbor by 2025. Excuse me. And then since people walking and biking are disproportionately affected, we have a specific metric around looking at tracking the share of serious injuries and fatalities by people walking and biking, as well as by the cause of those crashes. And then we also included a metric for, this is more tracking the actions that are being put towards this plan. So tracking the number of safety improvements installed on focus corridors and intersections each year. So with respect to mobility, one of the key strategies here is building out that all ages and abilities bike network. And again, with this one, so we have a map showing what the full build out of the network would look like, which streets are part of that and trails. And but coupled with that, we've added a toolbox to help you move forward on that strategy. So we have some different facility types called out by type of street, like what's appropriate on a major street, what's more appropriate or acceptable on a minor street, in order to get you to that very comfortable network. And I mentioned already that we had done a specific online outreach about uncontrolled crosswalks. And so that really informed this map that you see here. We think in order to improve mobility for pedestrians, that focusing on these crosswalks and making sure that those are safe and comfortable is really important. So how will we track progress towards mobility? We're looking at how much of the population has good access to that all ages and abilities bike network. So now you're at 51%, and we think you can get all the way up to 97% by 2030. With respect to transit, we're looking at how much of the population is close to a high frequency route. And we think you could go from 26% to 66%. And in order, this is also in service of meeting the goals of the A20 plan. So tracking share of trips made by walking, biking, and transit is another recommended way to track progress, and how many mobility devices, how many shared mobility vehicles are available in the city, giving people other options. So when we say shared mobility vehicles, we don't just mean cars, we mean bike share, we mean e-scooters as well. So with respect to accessibility for all, I think the critical, the most important strategy in this realm is completing the sidewalk network. So the city had already identified some near-term sidewalk gaps, and we recommend continuing to infill those, with those being the first focus, and then following that, focusing on major streets and then the remainder of the system. And then also with respect to accessibility, in a kind of different way of looking at accessibility, we've recommended expanding the reduced fare program for transit and shared mobility services. And I wanted to note here that we actually think the ride is doing really well with this already, and it has some pretty progressive policies, but just building on that expands accessibility of transit to others throughout the city. And then a focus too on creating shared streets. And this was of interest pre-pandemic, and I think now that you've gone through the Healthy Streets program, you probably have a lot of lessons learned there and a lot of good experiences that you could draw from. So with respect to accessibility, some of the targets that we recommend gauging against are the transportation costs as a percent of household income. Again, in Ann Arbor, this is actually lower than, I would say, like the national average or peer communities. But we do think that you could do better, and that it's worth striving for better. And then expanding the average number of jobs that are available within 20 minutes via different modes. So currently getting to jobs is easier with a car. And so we want to be able to expand people's reach to jobs if give them options beyond the car. So how many jobs can they reach if they're on transit or by bike? And then again, another area where the city is doing very well is in ADA accessible bus stops. At 89%, that's really impressive. But again, we still want to strive for more. So we think aiming to get all the way to 100 by 2025 is a good goal. And then eliminating the sidewalk gaps, as I mentioned in that first strategy. This less than 8 miles kind of, irked me a little bit, but I think there are definitely some gaps where either it's not necessary to have a sidewalk, it's still considered part of it's considered a gap based on our GIS analysis because both sides of the street are considered to be part of the network. But there are definitely some unique cases where one side of the street is against a rail embankment or something like that, where maybe adding a sidewalk really isn't critical. So in Healthy People, Sustainable Places, this is where you see some more land use recommendations filtering in. So one of the strategies we have here is to really focus on building out 20-minute neighborhoods. And that's a neighborhood where you can get to critical services or critical land uses such as parks for recreation, schools, work, commercial, shopping destinations within a 20-minute walk. So that's going to take a combination of land use strategies as well as transportation strategies. So we want to make sure that we're building out that sidewalk network and the bikeway network so that people can get to these places, but we also want to make sure that those places are relatively close by. And in this section, regarding this value, we're also suggesting better aligning parking supply with demand. Again, this is a little bit verging on the land use side of things, but getting parking right is really critical to creating a walkable environment. So updating the Unified Development Code to remove parking minimums so that you can better align the supply with the actual demand. And then metrics here include reducing the average vehicle miles traveled per day, increasing that share of the population that lives in a 20-minute neighborhood and achieving 100% by 2030, and increasing the share of the population that is currently meeting physical activity guidelines. And then finally, with respect to regional connectivity, one of the things driving this strategy here is that we're seeing a lot of the delay of roadway delay really concentrated at the rush hours. So we think developing or expanding the transportation demand management program that exists downtown, expanding that citywide and really encouraging other employers to build on that. So that could be done by expanding the actual program or adopting similar programs. And again, it could also be done by focusing on the land use side of things and building out more supportive land uses that really align better with transit. So that's by no means all, and I mentioned that a lot of the strategies cross-cut these values. So that's not to say that there's only one strategy that speaks to regional connectivity. But as I said, I'm kind of cherry picking for the sake of time here tonight. So as we look to how do we know if we are making progress on regional connectivity, the things that we are suggesting tracking here are that the share of commute trips into and out of Ann Arbor via transit almost double by 2030, and that you are doubling the number of people using GoPass or some sort of equivalent. So on our end, in terms of next steps, we are revising the document based on input from the committees, your input here tonight, and public input. And we have that virtual public meeting next week, and then we'll hopefully be back in front of you on November 18th, and then to the Planning Commission on December 1st. As Eli mentioned, that can shift if it needs to, but that's what we're looking at right now. So now I will stop sharing and open it up to questions.
Thank you. This is looking really great. It's been amazing to watch this process happen and see the way things I know we talked about in the commission have been translated into the report. So are there questions, comments, feedback? Commissioner Parsons.
Eli and Stacy, thank you so much for the presentation, all the work that you've done. It's really.
We're losing you again.
Sorry. Oh, that was good forward. Is that better?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. It's really encouraging to see everything that's going into this. I have some details that I want to share that I'd feel more comfortable with if they were in the plan ultimately. But overall, I'm really enthused by this. One is a minor, maybe just overlook or something. This is page 32 and 33. Focus intersections. The narrative is that Packard and Platt is a focus intersection, but the map does not show it. So that's an easy one, I assume, to either figure out or change a little bit. My bigger concerns is that on page 38, I very much like that you're introducing the idea of moving to school zones of 20 miles per hour, as well as recognizing that we have to work with the state legislature to indeed get 20 miles an hour within city limits. I'm wondering what conversations occurred so that we could potentially have all neighborhood streets be 20 miles an hour. And if we can't have all 20 mile an hour streets and residentials, maybe we have places that are designated as low stress bicycle networks, since these are corridors for school kids, that those also get that designation. So I'm a little bit hesitant that it's only school zones that might be open to this 20 mile an hour school zone. I'd rather it be a potential citywide move. The other thing to say is that page 64 and 65, the maps of the all ages and abilities bike routes. I think you guys did a lot of creative, really cool, interesting things. There's a lot of neighborhood networks that are put together. My concern is that there's not enough of the creative moves. So we can talk about this more maybe in the future, but what I'm concerned is if this is a static document, which our last one was, I've received feedback from other people that say, hey, you have to stick with the plan. Why aren't we sticking with the plan? Don't mess with the plan. So if this is a static document, there's a lot of other ways to get around. Well, I'll just list the streets that are currently in the low stress network include Miller, Dexter, Liberty, Stadium, Pontiac Trail, Plymouth, Glacier Way, and Geddes. We have to have better ways for a low stress network through these neighborhoods to get around these corridors. Those corridors will never be low stress unless we severely reduce the miles per hour, and I just don't see that happening. So I'd like us to consider that as well. Final thing to say in terms of gaps, for me, Highway 23 is a major barrier for any sort of bicycle network to get into Ann Arbor from the east. And I look at the bicycle network and all I see is gaps. Huron River, gap. Washtenaw, gap. Packard, maybe. Even then, it's said to be a potential route, but I don't see how it's going to be feasible. Ellsworth, not feasible. So I'd like us to really focus in the near future on those issues. Thanks. I've spoken a lot. Sorry about that, and I hope it came through clear.
Thanks, Brad. I think I caught most of it, but I might have missed a few details here and there. So I'd love if you could send those via email, those comments as well. That'd be helpful. And you kind of rattled off a few existing routes there. There's on the map on page 64, there's a distinction between what we're calling the all ages and abilities routes and routes. Because we want to recognize that there are definitely challenges to bringing all of those routes to that level of comfort of being what we call all ages and abilities, but we still think that they are, in some cases, they're already there, and in some cases, they are worth investing in, even if you can't get them all the way to, say, let's just throw out an example of a protected bike facility. We don't want you to give up and not do anything. So we think it might be worth having a route in some cases, even if you can't get it all the way to that all ages and abilities. Yeah, go ahead.
Stacy, I appreciate that, and I'm really sorry that my microphone might not be picking up on a lot. I listed those streets because those are streets that currently have bicycle networks that are sort of comfortable, but not really. I think we need to look into other avenues to get families and kids and people that are not comfortable on bikes downtown. The biggest example is Stadium. Stadium, traveling north and south, will never be comfortable for any family. You just can't do it. I don't care if there's bollards next to it. You're going to have gas trucks or 18-wheelers that are going 30 miles an hour. It's just not going to work. But there are other avenues that we can explore. You guys did a great job, by the way, of picking out the one. If you take Washington to the west up to Ravina, where the end of the presumed bike lane or bike boulevard would be, and then you cut across Huron using the North Ravina one-way street currently, and cut in and got into neighborhoods up there. So there's creative ways to do this. I'm just not sure that we've explored all the creative ways to avoid high traffic, high volume, even if it's not high speed, high traffic, high volume, big machines next to 4-foot paths. It's not going to be low stress. I think we should explore a little bit more. So I don't know if we need to necessarily tweak everything, but we might want to include a caveat that the Transportation Commission will have a subcommittee or a committee that will look at routes that are possible, that council will approve a group to look at routes that are possible. I just think there's a lot more out there that we can tweak. I think you guys did great in what you did notice, but I think there's other avenues that I like the flexibility for the city to explore.
Okay. Yeah, no, I get the premise of your comment now. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Councilmember Griswold.
Great report. I'm really exciting. I've been writing down notes as fast as I could. And I won't go through a lot of details, and I haven't read the report, so I can't refer to page numbers. But one issue is that the vegetation on Getty's east of Huron Parkway, and in some of this, it's a township island, but the road belongs to the city, and the vegetation grows right up to the traffic lanes, and it's actually trimmed by the vehicles. And so it's impossible to ride a bike there because you can't even move off the lane. It's like a wall of vegetation.
Councilmember, this sounds like a very specific instance as opposed to concerns about the report or responses to the report. I'd love it if we could keep our focus on the report as a whole.
Okay.
Report. There are other ways to approach those kinds of problems.
Okay, sorry I went into detail, but I think low-hanging fruit is looking at the vegetation in areas where we could improve biking safely. And I'll save my other comment for the end of the meeting, but great report, and I'm looking forward to implementation.
Commissioner Hull.
Yeah, I was going to mention, I read in the report, not the presentation, some stuff about transit, and it mentions stuff about increasing frequencies and stuff. on weekdays and Saturdays, but it didn't say anything about Sundays, and it didn't say anything about evenings. And I'm wondering where that fits in and whether maybe that could be revised to, because I feel like, yeah, one thing that's commonly been a sore spot in our transit system is Sundays. It's actually, service is actually a little more after COVID than it was before, which is kind of odd. But yeah, it always used to end at like 7 p.m. and everything hourly. And I'm wondering why Sunday wasn't addressed and why evenings weren't addressed.
I don't have a specific answer for that, so I'll have to check back with my team and see what the strategy was on that.
Commissioner Parsons.
So Stacy, I just want to clarify, if I came across too negative or critical, that's not my intent at all.
No, you didn't.
I love most of this report. I particularly love the idea of wayfinding that you all mentioned in that report as really important. And I agree, it's really important. So I'm just trying to figure out what's the best way to find the best ways before we tell people to actually navigate them. The other thing that I want to mention is that I really appreciated that there's actual next steps. There's ways to move forward out of this document as opposed to here's what you should do, good luck. I really appreciate that. One of the comments I did want to share is that it seems like a lot falls on engineering. Not that that's a fault or anything, but it just recognized to me that their list is long. And I'm wondering how to spread that out and make that burden either easier or more communal in effort or community derived or across departments. I don't know, that list seemed long for engineering. Maybe they're up to it. Maybe Robert can, Mr. Hess can talk about that. But,
well, I will note that they noticed that as well.
yeah, it's a long list.
And that's, that's the kind of thing that I think you guys as or staff and community members and other folks from other agencies have a better handle on than we do. So that's the kind of thing we would love some input on. And no, I didn't think you were being critical. I was just trying to furiously write notes.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and maybe with the language about engineering as a lead ties into the networks. Whenever there's some built-in flexibility, I think, with these plans, so that staff can move forward in the direction they seem best fitted with council approval. And maybe it's just me over the last 4 years. I just had a lot of personal feedback that says, hey, this is what the plan said. Why aren't you doing it? Even though what might be the outcome is better. So built-in flexibility, I don't know what to call it exactly. But I appreciate what you're doing, and I look forward to moving forward with it.
Other comments and questions? Commissioner Felt.
I just wanted to mention that there's another meeting tomorrow, as Eli said, from 9 to 11, and I'll be there representing the Transportation Commission.
And so just a reminder of the process, and I'm going to say this, and please correct me, I'll probably get pieces of it wrong. But so we, members of the commission, have until November 6th to review the full draft report, provide feedback, and then it's going to come back to us at our November meeting to vote on on recommending it to council. Did I get those pieces right, Eli?
I think that that's our aspiration.
Okay. Great. So we will all have another opportunity to discuss this, and we can all plan to spend some quality time with the report and get feedback to send it to Kayla, and Kayla will get it to the right people. Are there other questions and comments before we move on? All right, this is looking really great. I'm really excited to spend more time with it. And so thank you very much for the presentation. This was terrific.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
you
you.
guys. I would also add, I know that I mentioned that we put the committees to work, but we really put you guys to work, and we got a lot of feedback from you all on the strategies, and that's really encouraging and helpful to us in the work that we do. But also, Ann Arbor is a very engaged community in a way that I am confident that this plan is not going to spend any time sitting on a shelf, and that is really heartening. So thank you all for the work that you've done so far, giving your input.
Great, thank you. So now we move on quite a bit later to staff report and updates. So we received a staff report providing project updates with our agenda materials, and it's available in Legistar, and Raymond is going to give us the highlight reel.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair. I was expecting to have to do one of my 30-second presentations, but we are back on schedule, so I can spend a little bit of time on this. So Allen Creek berm opening is the first project to highlight. There's been a sort of supply chain issue related to fencing, so that project is running a little bit behind schedule, and it's not expected to be open to traffic until December. On the annual street resurfacing project, work on Gettys, Boardwalk, Oakbrook, South Main have all been done, the asphalt paths. Work on Granger is expected to be complete by the end of this month. On the Barton Drive project, there's a new anticipated completion date, which is this week. So that has been updated. On the Fuller Court Sidewalk Gap project, construction is scheduled to begin mid-October and last for about a month. So it should be completed by November. On the Williams Street improvement, this one's might be of interest to some of you. There's kind of a new treatment that is being piloted and explored. So there's a hardened centerline treatment that's been installed on Division. And then there's another one that's being considered at Thompson as well. So I think this is kind of an interesting application of some of the things that Stacy's talked about with sort of these quick deployment sort of things that can reduce speeds and lead to safety improvements. All right, under the DBA for People-Friendly Streets initiatives, First and Ashley are scheduled to be completed in 2021 construction season. However, the State Street Improvement Project, which was originally scheduled to begin in 2021, has been pushed back a year to 2022. There's some other updates under that section too related to healthy streets, but I'll talk about those in just a moment. I'll circle back on that. Scioto Church, there's some new information, but you already received a presentation this evening on that from Jane Allen, so I don't need to go into any more detail there. Street millage and new sidewalk millage, you've heard a report on this issue in the past. That is on the November ballot, so keep an eye out for it. There is additional information that you can find on the city's website about what that millage is for and what it would be used for. And there's other social media posts and things like that that kind of help explain what that millage is for. All right, healthy streets, circling back to that. This was brought up at the October 5th City Council meeting, and Council took action to discontinue parts of the healthy streets on the arterials outside of downtown, in particular on Packard between Platt and Eisenhower, on the Broadway Bridge, and South Main Street between Pauline and Stadium. And so those were taken down, those portions of the Healthy Streets program were taken down last week in large part. There has been some data collection that is ongoing, so we do plan on reporting that to Council later this year, probably in December, once all of the Healthy Streets are down and we can compile all the data and give that data back to Council. And then the last thing I want to note related to Healthy Streets is that all of the deployments are coming down in November. We're actually working with the contractor and the DDA and the city right now to kind of coordinate those schedules. But whether it's early to mid-November, a lot of it is just to prepare for winter maintenance and snow plowing. And then, some of the other pilots are coming to a conclusion in terms of their 90-day kind of pilot duration. So just a heads up that whether it's a neighborhood slow street or a healthy street on an arterial, those will all be coming down here in the coming weeks. On the Lower Town Mobility Study, it's mentioned here that there have been a series of office hours. The idea is we've been trying to explore different types of engagement activities for the public. And so these are sort of drop-in, virtual, ask questions about the project. We had one in September. There are 2 this month in October, with the next one being on Friday, and then one in November. That will be followed up with the public meeting, which is scheduled for mid-November. So all of that's kind of leaning up towards that. The other thing to note on that is we are starting to transition from kind of data collection and analysis to alternative development. So we're going to get into kind of interesting discussions related to what the possibilities are for the Lower Town project. So you might want to tune into that if you're interested in helping guide that. Streetlight implementation, again, we've just updated the figures. Over 1,000 streetlight outages have been addressed by DTE this calendar year. We'll just continue to give you those updated numbers. Traffic calming, there are a couple of notable changes that have happened. Fernwood was approved by City Council, and construction has actually occurred. I will say there are not all of the devices were installed correctly, so the contractor is having to go back out and make some corrections to those. So that's happening here shortly. We're just starting to coordinate that work right now. And then the other traffic calming program that's currently underway is Glenwood. That is out to the residents for kind of their final vote of approval or denial for the project. Those are due back by October 26th. And then depending upon what we hear from the residents, we'll determine what our next steps are. The last thing I want to note too related to traffic calming is you may recall Fernwood was a fairly expensive project because it included some raised intersections and the like. It was upwards of about $150,000. So we have actually exhausted our entire traffic calming budget for this fiscal year. So we are going to kind of pump the brakes a little bit on any additional, once Glenwood, the process is done, we have to kind of put the traffic calming on ice for the remainder of the fiscal year. So we can pick it back up in July, but there's no budget right now to support any additional activity for this fiscal year. And then the last piece talks about the transportation plan, but you just got an extensive update from Eli and Stacy. So again, I probably can't add anything that they haven't already talked about at length. And with that, that concludes my report, Madam Chair and Commissioners, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Hall.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I know Research Park Drive has been mentioned in the past, but I haven't heard it for a while, and I'm wondering what's going on with that.
Yeah, good question, Commissioner Hull. I think it was the last update there was a very minor little one-liner that said some of the concrete bases are being poured. I just had a team meeting this week, and I think they are receiving some of the mast arms and some of the support infrastructure for the signals. But that work is ongoing. We're just kind of waiting for the orders to come in, and then we'll go out and build them. The good news is since the concrete foundations have been poured, we can construct the actual signals in the winter. We don't need to, it's kind of an all-season sort of work that can be done. So as soon as those materials come in, you'll see some work above ground happening on that.
What about the crosswalks? Does that go in at the same time as the signals or after the signals?
I'd have to check. The crosswalk will be dependent on some of the pavement markings and some of the opportunities for whether that can be done in the weather. I think, the weather's not going to be very conducive to pavement markings here really soon. So I wouldn't be surprised if the pavement markings go in next construction cycle, but I can follow up with the project manager on that to see what the schedule is for the pavement markings.
Can you remind us what the annual budget is for traffic calming total?
Yeah, it's, don't quote me on the exact figure, but I want to say it's around $130,000 annually. So as you may recall, it used to be it used to be a lot less. It used to be around $30,000. And then in this current biennial budget, City Council agreed with recommendations from Transportation Commission to bump that number up. And so, you know, the good news is we have a much more robust budget than we've had in the past. You know, it's funny because sometimes we are underspent, sometimes we are overspent. It really just depends on which projects receive support from the neighborhood and how expensive those projects are. So sometimes we hit the mark, sometimes we're over, sometimes we're under. It's just really hard to predict in terms of whether, you know, 130 is a proper amount, if it's too little, too much, so forth and so on.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Parsons, I think I saw your hand.
Well, yeah, but just related, I was just going to, you know, reconfirm that July 2021 is the first time that we're going to revisit spending money on traffic calming. And I get it, and I wanted to clarify, yes, that is indeed triple what was a few years ago that we recommended. So apparently a small median and some raised intersections cost a lot of money, I guess, which, you know, I don't doubt, but maybe we need to either revisit that budget, or we need to better tie it in to how we treat neighborhoods as well as school areas, because that is a school thoroughfare for kids and you know, the like, and children and walkers and bikers. You know, it's I don't know. We might want to think about how we disperse that, and maybe we can talk about that after the project update, the transportation update comes out. But I'm a little frustrated. We've already spent it, even though I've heard great things from all the neighbors about Fernwood. I did. Kayla, thank you for pushing that through in the way you did. I don't even want to say pushing. They all, from what I understood, really appreciated it. So thanks.
Other questions, comments? Commissioner Hadamaki.
Thank you. First, so for the traffic calming budget, so we have to wait till next fiscal year to do traffic calming, but does that include engaging in any studies or accepting applications from neighborhoods? Or is it you can't even, nobody can mention traffic calming until July, or, you know, what really is the limit on what you can't do?
We can accept applications and petitions. We can file those, but in terms of you know, committing staff time and resources to even starting a new process, we just don't have the budget to support that, because you know, the way we bill our time as city staff, we bill them to kind of projects or, you know, budget lines, and so we wouldn't be able to work on traffic calming in any large degree because that budget is now exhausted. So that's process as well as construction. But, you know, receiving applications, things like that we can just kind of file and things like that, we can handle those easier to tasks. But you know, the process, quite frankly, for traffic calming is fairly labor intensive. I think it's a good process. I think it warrants a lot of you know, attention. But to actually go through it, you know, the process alone can cost upwards of like $15,000 of staff time. And so when we're out of the budget, we can't bill it to a budget that's already exhausted.
So I have another process question. Would this be a situation where we could have on a future agenda an item where Transportation Commission recommends some additional budget allotment, at least to continue the sort of process evaluation aspects of these traffic calming things? Because I know the queue keeps getting longer, right? So I wonder, I don't know what the appropriate steps would be to bring something like this to council, but I'm wondering if that's a possibility.
Yeah, I think, the Transportation Commission has a couple different avenues. We are starting the budget process. So, I think the timing is probably ripe that if the, Transportation Commission has thoughts about whether, the budget is adequate or enough, the timing might be good. But I will say there's always a trade-off too, right? I mean, the pie is fixed. So anything that we take, or if we need to put more money on one thing, we need to find that money from somewhere else. And so that's kind of the challenge is, where can we find that additional funding to support additional activities?
Right. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. So thank you, Raymond. I think we're going to move on to liaison reports. So any commissioners who specifically serve as a liaison to another body or organization are invited to provide brief reports and updates. And it looks like Councilmember Griswold, I know looks like you had something to, or maybe not.
Molly, I'm not sure if that one is ready yet. It was a note regarding the Sam Short supplemental work, but I don't know if I heard whether or not that has gone to council. So that was something I have yet to follow up on you. If you're not prepared to provide an update this evening, we can plan that for a future item, future agenda.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
What I was going to mention regarding healthy streets is that I did introduce an amendment to refer the decision back to staff, and that did not receive enough votes to move forward. So it wasn't approved.
Okay. And it looks like I saw Commissioner Hall and Commissioner Smith also had reports.
Yeah, I was just going to say briefly, we had the Commission on Disability Issues meeting, and we were going to talk a little bit more about like the crosswalk law. It's just something we were waiting to see the crash data before discussing any recommendation on that. And yeah, I think we're going to do something next month. And we're also we're talking about the vegetation ordinance, which I believe came up here as well. That's all I was going to say.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Smith.
Hello, just wanted to let everyone know that we have launched our ticketing. The mobile ticketing, Easy Fare, is up and running, so people can download the app and buy tickets and use them on our service. So that's a proud moment for us. And then also, we have done what I would call as a pro forma update to our Title VI plan. We did not change any of the metrics that were in the plan that had been established for many, many years. But it is time for an update from the census data and those kinds of things. So we have updated the census data. We're holding public meetings on it on the 4th and the 5th of November and on the 10th. And we'll also be talking at that time about some additional service we're adding back on Scioto Church Road, bringing back a modified Route 26. So just wanted to let folks know we're holding those, and stay tuned for announcements about how to log on and all those kinds of things. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other liaison reports? So we can move on then to commission member communications. So all commissioners are invited to provide reports and updates. Okay, I'm not, yes, Councilmember Griswold.
I have some good news regarding our work with the Michigan Department of Transportation. Frequently, staff tries to get them to move forward, and they sometimes need a little political nudge. We now have regular meetings with Senator Jeff Irwin and Representative Yusuf Rabi, along with MDOT officials, and our city administrator, Tom Crawford, has been involved. So we are making progress, and I think we have the right amount of political pressure to move these forwards. And I don't know if Tom Crawford would like to comment at all.
You're still muted, but it looks like you're saying no.
I don't have anything to add to that. And we do have the ability to get there, and the Huron Street corridor, let's see, the Huron, help me out, Councilman Griswold, it's too late.
The crosswalk on Huron near Thayer.
Thayer, thank you, is we are expecting that improvement to occur to start around April or May of next year. So fingers crossed. That's been a challenging one for us.
Can I just say they did move it up to an April start date. Otherwise, it was going to be in the August build package with other crosswalks. So that was a major achievement, I think, given MDOT's resistance.
Any others? Okay, so quick call for agenda items. As usual, this is an opportunity to just put the agenda item out there, not actually discuss the agenda item. Commissioner Parsons.
I found it really useful this month to have a lot of correspondence via letters. I don't know if they're addressed to the commission, but it was all related to transportation. I think there were 7 or 8 that were really useful to read. I don't know if that was an anomaly and we just got more than usual, or if those are always shared. But I would suggest those are always in the agenda, that we see those correspondence that relate to transportation that is in the city. It's really illuminating. It gives us an idea of how people are feeling, as well as ways that we can help problem solve. So I just encourage that to happen again. And thank you, staff, for passing that along and what you do.
Thank you, Bradley. I'll just quickly respond. Those were all emails that were addressed to transportationcommission@a2gov.org. So they came into the commission's inbox. So any communications to that inbox, as long as it pertains in any way to transportation, I'll include it on your agenda, as I have been, and that was quite a spike. We got an influx of communication, so that's great that I think people are finding that email address. It's posted on the website and are now utilizing that to reach out. So hope we'll continue to see it.
I'd say that maybe we can encourage that more, because I paid attention. It was a mixed bag of things, and it's always good to hear more voices. I appreciate that, Kayla. So any ways that we can encourage more of that feedback, especially now when we're not available in person as much, I fully endorse.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hadamaki.
Yeah, I've heard some concern recently over an article about the autonomous vehicle environment in the city. I think specifically about the Yandex company and kind of why they chose Ann Arbor, and painting us as like a wild, wild west. And at one point bragging about a driver sitting in the back seat. And, so there's been some concern in the community about that article. And so maybe if there's an opportunity to discuss what regulations or guidelines we have now, and if there's a different direction we want to take, would be good.
Great. We can talk about where that will fit. All right, I'm not seeing any more. We're getting real close to 9, so I'm just going to keep us moving. So if there are no objections, we will adjourn our meeting, and I'm looking for no objections. So this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. It's always great to see you.